Have you ever wondered why some women can't stop checking the stove, the door, the windows, or their thoughts? She looks calm on the outside, composed, even pristine. Everything has its place. Her mornings are choreographed like rituals. The toothbrush must hit the back molars 5 times. The pillow must lie just so, and the sink must be wiped until it forgets it was ever touched. But beneath this surface lies a storm not even she dares name. This isn't about being tidy. This isn't about being organized. This is about survival. Control for her isn't a preference. It's a strategy. It is the fragile scaffolding that keeps her upright in a world that once shattered her. Somewhere in her past, whether in childhood, heartbreak, betrayal, or sheer emotional neglect, chaos came. It came violently, or it came in silence. But either way, it taught her one thing: you must control, or you will be destroyed. What would you think if I told you that her compulsions, the cleaning, the checking, the rehearsing, the repeating, are not neurotic habits, but protective prayers whispered to the gods of order, each one an attempt to hold back the dark tide? Because beneath her need for perfection lives something far more terrifying, a deep, hidden belief that if she ever stops, everything will fall apart, including her. Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz would tell you, the problem is not the fear. The problem is the relationship to the thought. The intrusive idea, what if I forgot to lock the door? Or, what if I harmed someone and didn't know? Is just a mental event. But for the woman who grew up in the shadows of unpredictability, the thought feels like a threat to her identity. The brain, wired for danger, activates its ancient alarm system, not because something is wrong, but because it's been trained over time to confuse fear with fact, and so she acts again and again. Not because she wants to, but because if she doesn't, the anxiety becomes unbearable. The fear doesn't lessen with logic. It amplifies in silence. And worst of all, part of her believes that if she doesn't obey the thought, she's irresponsible, unsafe, unworthy. But here's the darker truth. It's not really about the stove, or the germs, or the alignment of picture frames. It's about guilt. It's about shame. It's about a gnawing, wordless voice inside that says, you are bad, you are dangerous, you are one mistake away from being exposed. Where does this voice come from? Jung would call it the shadow, the repressed parts of the self that were never allowed to breathe in childhood. The little girl who felt rage, but was told to be quiet. The teenager who needed softness, but became numb. The woman who made herself into a fortress because vulnerability was never safe. Control became her persona, her mask. And like all masks, it eventually suffocates. What she craves isn't order. What she aches for is peace. But peace cannot come through more control. Dr. Schwartz teaches, the brain can be rewired, not by eliminating intrusive thoughts, but by relating to them differently. It begins with mindfulness, with naming the thought. This is an obsession. Then separating from it. I don't have to engage with it. Then refocusing. I can choose where my attention goes. And finally revaluing. This thought is not meaningful. It's just noise from an old wound. It sounds simple, but it is holy work, shadow work, inner child work, nervous system healing. A reclamation of the sacred feminine, the part of her that knows how to sit in uncertainty without collapsing, how to hold paradox without choosing sides, how to soften without falling apart. She is not broken, she is bracing. And once she learns that safety is not in control, but in surrender, her rituals begin to lose their grip. And still, she returns to the thought, the same one, or its cousin, dressed in new logic, new guilt, new disguise. What if I didn't wash that well enough? What if I hit someone with my car and didn't notice? What if this feeling means something worse? It isn't the content that matters. It's the pattern, the cycle. Her mind is like a stage on which fear performs the same play, over and over, changing the costume but never the script. And the worst part? She knows it. She knows it's irrational. She knows it doesn't make sense, but it feels real. It feels urgent. And the body listens to that urgency with trembling obedience. This is the tragedy of obsessive-compulsive suffering. It's not stupidity or weakness. It's overintelligence, turned inward and weaponized. It's an emotionally intelligent mind, forced to use brilliance in service of survival. Dr. Schwartz calls it a brain error, a hiccup in the caudate nucleus, a misfiring of the neural network. But even he knows, it's not just biology, it's biography. The thoughts arise from chemistry, yes, but they take shape in the stories we lived through, the patterns we inherited, the things we feared but couldn't name. Somewhere along the line, her nervous system was taught that danger lives in silence, that stillness means death, that uncertainty must be annihilated or she will be consumed. And so she acts, not to fix, but to escape the unbearable tension of the unclosed loop. The ritual is not the goal. Relief is, but the relief never lasts. Because the fear was never about the surface. It was always about the self. Who would she be if she didn't check? Who would she be if she didn't fix, control, clean, confess? Would she still be safe? Would she still be good? This is where the shadow emerges. Not just fear of doing something wrong, but fear of being something wrong, of being contaminated, evil, defective, monstrous, unforgivable. The feminine archetype here is not the goddess. It's the exiled witch, locked away in the psyche, feared for her depth, her rage, her mystery. And OCD, in its cruel elegance, becomes the jailer. It says, if you just follow my rules, I'll protect you from yourself. But it never keeps that promise. She begins to realize that the compulsions are not solving the fear. They are feeding it. The more she obeys the voice, the more powerful it becomes. The monster grows not from resistance, but from reverence. And here lies the turning point. To heal, she must do something radical. Disobey the thought. She must allow the door to remain unchecked. Let the hands remain imperfectly clean. Let the thought remain unanswered. Let the guilt pass through her like smoke, not as a fact, but as a ghost from the past. Dr. Schwartz teaches that freedom comes not from fighting the thought, but from unmasking it. By calling it what it is, a misfiring, a trick of the brain, an echo from old trauma. She takes the first step toward mastery. But this is not cold logic. This is not suppression. This is not just ignore it. This is sacred defiance. This is saying, I hear the fear, but I will not bow to it. I feel the urgency, but I will not move. I see the thought, and I name it false. This is spiritual muscle, not the kind born from certainty, but the kind forged in discomfort, in not knowing, in the fire of what if. The woman who once clung to rituals like a lifeboat begins to glimpse something new, that she doesn't have to eliminate the ocean. She just has to learn to float. But floating, true floating, means surrender. And surrender terrifies her more than the obsessions ever did. It is the ultimate paradox. The very thing that could set her free is what she was taught never to trust. Letting go. She built her entire life on vigilance, on control, on outsmarting danger before it strikes. Surrender to her feels like betrayal, like giving the wheel to the very chaos she's been running from since she was a child. Because somewhere, deep beneath the surface, She carries a secret. No one ever protected her. No one ever came to say, "You're safe now." No one ever told her that it was okay not to be okay. So she became her own protector, a hypervigilant goddess of detail, order, and invisible rituals. She traded her freedom for false security. She became her own jailer. But even steel eventually rusts. Even control begins to crack. And in those cracks, the truth leaks out. The rituals never really worked. They were smoke. Symbolic movements to avoid a grief she was never allowed to feel. The grief of never being held. The grief of carrying fear in her bones like inherited ash. The grief of punishing herself every day for the brain she was given. The grief of believing she had to earn peace. Here is where the healing begins, not with logic, but with grief. OCD isn't just a malfunction. It's a message, a signal from the psyche that something inside was never witnessed, never comforted, never given a name. She starts to notice the way her breath always sits shallow in her chest, the way silence makes her heart pound like she's doing something wrong, the way she needs noise, motion, fixing, just to avoid the stillness where memory lives. She begins to see that her compulsions are not just mental loops. They're somatic responses, a body trying to stay alive in a world that once punished her for being human. And this is what Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz understood deeply. That healing from OCD is not about erasing thoughts, but changing your relationship to them. It's not about being calm. It's about choosing presence in the middle of chaos. It's about retraining the brain to say, "This thought is uncomfortable, but it is not me. This anxiety is strong, but it cannot define me. I do not need to act on fear to prove I'm worthy of peace." She begins the 4 steps. Relabel the thought. This is just OCD. Reattribute. It's not me. It's my brain. Refocus. I choose to direct my attention elsewhere. Revalue. This thought has no power unless I give it meaning. But beyond the steps, something more profound happens. She begins to meet her inner world with curiosity, not judgment. She stops asking, "How do I make this go away?" and starts asking, "What is this pain trying to tell me?" And slowly, she discovers the truth, that the woman who once feared chaos is not weak, she is wounded. That the woman who obsesses is not broken, she is burdened. That the rituals were never madness. They were mourning songs for the parts of her that were never allowed to cry, and so she begins to make a new kind of space, not for perfection, but for permission. Permission to feel, to pause, to rest. Because healing for her is not a destination, it's a quiet revolution, a return to self, a holy rebellion against the lie that she must control everything to be lovable. She begins to notice beauty in the disorder. She lets the picture frame hang slightly crooked. She leaves the stove unchecked, not because she stopped caring, but because she started trusting. And that trust didn't come from the world. It came from within. There comes a moment in the healing of a woman with OCD that no one else sees. It is not loud. It does not come with applause or fanfare. There is no one watching. It happens on a Tuesday, in the quiet hum of a kitchen where she used to compulsively clean. She walks past the counter, notices a smudge, and does nothing. It's not rebellion. It's not defiance. It's not even courage in the traditional sense. It's soft power, a trembling kind of trust. She lets the imperfection exist, and the world doesn't end. In that moment, something ancient dies. The part of her that believed her rituals held the universe together. And something sacred is born. A woman who no longer negotiates with her thoughts as if they are gods. But this shift does not come all at once. It is earned slowly, through the fire of repetition without reinforcement. What therapists call exposure with response prevention, ERP, and what the soul might call alchemical transformation. Each time she resists the ritual, her nervous system screams, and each time she survives it, a new wire is laid across her brain, one that says, I am safe, even in the unknown. Dr. Schwartz knew this. The brain is plastic. It changes. It remembers. And when she chooses a different response, even through the fear, she is literally rewriting the neural story of her life. But what truly changes her is not science. It is compassion. She begins to see her OCD not as a flaw, but as a loyal soldier, one that fought to protect her from an emotional war she was too young to fight. She does not shame the rituals. She thanks them. Then she releases them. And in that space, something unexpected begins to grow. Peace without proof. She no longer needs to feel certain to act with confidence. She no longer needs to check in order to feel responsible. She no longer mistakes anxiety for truth. Instead of erasing every speck of doubt, she learns to walk beside it. The thought arises, what if something bad happens? And instead of bowing, she nods and says, maybe, but I choose life anyway. This is not the cold detachment of a woman who no longer cares. This is the warm detachment of a woman who finally trusts her body over her fear. She reclaims the rhythm of her days. There is space now for joy, for stillness, for beauty that doesn't beg to be earned. She laughs more, sleeps deeper, says no faster. And when the thoughts return, because they will, she does not panic. She smiles, because now she knows they are not omens. They are echoes. And she is not the echo. She is the voice. What once felt like a curse becomes a calling, a call to go inward, to meet the self beneath the storm. And what she finds there is not chaos, not filth, not sin, but something sacred, soft, and eternal. A presence, a light that never left, a self she doesn't have to earn. This is the woman OCD could never destroy. This is the woman who chose to float, who let the wave pass without swimming, who learned that control was a cage disguised as safety. And in her stillness, she remembers, she was never broken. She was just too awake for a world that demanded she be numb. And now she chooses awakening over avoidance, not because it's easy, but because it's real. The woman who no longer believes her thoughts becomes free,